The Incredibles movies are fun, loud, colorful, and quietly full of stuff that absolutely does not add up if you stop and think about it for more than 5 seconds. And with Incredibles 3 officially on the way, there are some questions this franchise has been dodging for almost 2 decades now. Let's start with the biggest one. Where do the supers even come from? Seriously, in a world where people can stretch like rubber bands, lift trains, turn invisible, and freeze entire buildings, you'd think someone would have sat us down at some point and said, "Okay, here's how this started." But nope. The Incredibles universe just drops us into a world where supers exist, everyone sort of accepts it, and we're expected to roll with it. And to be fair, it works for the story, but the longer the franchise goes on, the harder it gets to ignore. Unlike Marvel or DC, there's no cosmic radiation accident, no alien ancestry, no ancient gods handing out powers like party favors. Mr. Incredible doesn't know why he's strong. Elastigirl doesn't know why her body works like a sentient stress ball. They just are. And that opens the door to a bunch of theories, none of which have been confirmed, but all of which feel like something Incredibles 3 could finally explore. One popular idea is that supers are basically a genetic offshoot of humanity. Maybe descendants of older supers whose abilities slowly passed down over generations. That would explain why powers feel kind of personalized and emotional instead of random. Dash is fast because he's hyperactive. Violet turns invisible because she wants to disappear. The powers don't feel engineered. They feel personal. But then there's the much darker theory. The government one. We already know the National Supers Agency had an uncomfortable amount of control over supers during the so-called Golden Age. Files, surveillance, forced relocations, identity erasure. That's not exactly casual bureaucracy behavior. So some fans think supers might have been created intentionally through government experiments, maybe generations ago, and then quietly folded into society once things got out of hand. And here's the thing. Even if that were true, it doesn't mean supers were raised in labs or treated like weapons from birth. The movies actually show the opposite. Characters like Psychwave discovered their powers as teenagers. A deleted scene from Incredibles 2 shows Gazerbeam living a completely normal civilian life for years before deciding to become a hero. So even if the government played a role, these people still grew up thinking they were ordinary, until they weren't. And of course, there's the simplest explanation of all, that supers are just regular people who randomly awaken abilities at some point in life. With no master plan, no origin story, no grand explanation. Which honestly might be the most unsettling answer. Because it means this world is just casually producing walking natural disasters and hoping society figures it out. What makes this question so important is that it affects everything else. How the public sees supers. Why they were outlawed so easily. Why fear spread so fast. And why people like Syndrome became so bitter about being left out. Incredibles 3 has the perfect opportunity to finally pull back the curtain. Even just a little, and give us something solid. Because at this point, not explaining it feels more intentional than mysterious. Now, speaking of mysteries that feel like ticking time bombs, let's talk about the smallest member of the family, who also happens to be the most terrifying. Jack. This kid showed up in the first movie looking like a normal baby, fooled everyone, and then spent the second movie casually revealing that he might be the most overpowered character in the entire franchise. Laser eyes, teleportation, phasing, fire powers, demon form, metal form, duplication, turning into goo. At one point, it honestly feels like the animators were just seeing how far they could push it before someone told them to stop. Which brings us to the second big question. Will Jack actually stay that powerful when he grows up? You'd think the answer is yes, obviously. How do you give a character that many abilities and then take them away? But the movies quietly suggest that it's not that simple. It's already been confirmed that super babies in this universe tend to show multiple powers early on. most of which fade as their personality becomes more defined. And that detail matters a lot. In The Incredibles, powers are deeply tied to who someone is. Dash is fast because he can't sit still. Violet turns invisible and creates force fields because she's shy and emotionally guarded. Babies don't really have a fixed personality yet, so Jack is basically a blank canvas, which is exactly how director Brad Bird described him. So yeah, it's totally possible that as Jack grows up, most of his powers disappear, leaving him with just one or two abilities that actually match who he becomes as a person. But then again, Jack clearly isn't a normal case. Edna Mode straight up says it. Even by super baby standards, this kid is weird. He has way too many abilities, and they're way too extreme. Which makes it very hard to believe he'll just grow up into an average super and call it a day. A popular theory is that Jack will keep all of his transformation-based powers. The demon form, the metal body, the ability to reshape himself entirely. If Elastigirl can stretch and morph her body, Jack might be that concept taken to its absolute limit, evolving it into full-on physical transformation instead of elasticity. And if Incredibles 3 jumps forward a few years, which a lot of fans expect, we might finally get answers. Not just about how powerful Jack becomes, but about whether having that much power is even a good thing. Because a kid who can bend reality without fully understanding consequences is kind of terrifying, actually. And that's only scratching the surface. Because once you start pulling on these threads, the rest of the Incredibles universe starts unraveling in really interesting ways. And trust me, the next questions get even messier. Next up, we'll be talking about a villain who technically had a grand entrance, a massive setup, and every reason to become a recurring problem, and then somehow just slipped through the cracks like the movie forgot to finish his sentence. So, where is the Underminer? This guy didn't show up quietly. He burst through the ground in the middle of a city, delivered one of the most over-the-top villain monologues in the entire franchise, and announced himself like he was about to become the next big recurring threat. The Parr family suits up. The music swells. The movie cuts to black. And for 14 years, that's where the story just paused. When Incredibles 2 finally picks up that cliffhanger, it feels like we're about to get some kind of redemption arc for that moment. And instead, what we get is chaos. A lot of chaos. The family's rusty, the city takes a beating, public opinion tanks, and through all of that, the Underminer does the one thing villains aren't supposed to do. He gets away. No big defeat. No dramatic capture. He just drills back underground and vanishes, while the story moves on to screenslaver and bigger ideological battles. Which is kind of funny in a dark way, because it makes the Underminer feel less like a defeated villain and more like a loose end that's been actively ignored. And now superheroes are legal again, which honestly makes him more dangerous, not less. Supers are visible, predictable, out in public. That's basically an open invitation for someone who specializes in surprise attacks and underground chaos. Incredibles 3 could easily bring him back, not as the main villain, but as a reminder that some threats don't go away just because the spotlight moves on. He's the kind of antagonist who thrives in the background, waiting for the moment everyone assumes the danger has passed. And narratively, it would make a lot of sense. You don't introduce a villain like that, let him escape, and then pretend he never existed unless you're planning to do something with him later. Now, let's talk about a character who technically never made it onto the big screen, but has been lurking in the franchise's DNA since the very beginning. Does Zerich exist? Before Syndrome was ever the villain of The Incredibles, Pixar had a very different idea in mind. Zerich was supposed to be the main antagonist, and honestly, reading about him feels like peeking into a much darker version of the movie that almost happened. This wasn't a villain with a grudge and a cool costume. This was someone deeply unsettling. Zerich was obsessed with Elastigirl, terrified of aging, and willing to perform horrifying experiments to stay young forever. At one point in early drafts, he was even responsible for the deaths of everyone born on a specific day, all to preserve his youth. That's not something you casually write, unless you're planning to push the story into much darker territory. He was ultimately cut, which makes sense for the tone Pixar wanted at the time. but he never fully disappeared. Zerich later showed up in the Incredibles comic books, where he was every bit as manipulative, patient, and terrifying as originally planned. He nearly dismantled the heroes psychologically before they even realized what he was doing. Now, the comics aren't canon. That's true, but Zerich isn't a comic original character either. He was always meant to be part of this universe. He just got delayed. And Incredibles 3 might finally be the right moment for him. The audience that grew up with the first movie is older now. The franchise has already started tackling heavier themes like public trust, accountability, and control. Introducing a villain like Zerich wouldn't feel out of place anymore. It would feel like the story maturing alongside its viewers. Instead of another giant robot or flashy tech villain, Zerich would be quiet, calculating, and deeply personal. The kind of threat you don't see coming until it's already too late. And now, let's talk about a character who actually did exist, played a huge role, and then just vanished into thin air. What happened to Mirage? If you remember the first movie, Mirage was Syndrome's right-hand woman, the one doing the dirty work, luring supers into fake missions and sending them straight into Omni-droid death traps. For most of the movie, she's cool, composed, and clearly very good at what she does. But then something interesting happens. She realizes that Syndrome doesn't care about her at all, that she's just another tool. And the moment that truth sinks in, she flips. She frees Mr. Incredible. She helps the Parr family escape. And then, that's it, she's gone. The second movie doesn't mention her. No follow-up. No confirmation of her fate. Which feels intentional because Mirage is one of the few characters in the franchise who genuinely seems capable of change. In the comics, Mirage actually becomes an agent for the NSA and works alongside the heroes, trying to make up for what she did. And while the comics aren't canon, that arc feels like something the movies could easily adapt. Bringing Mirage back as a morally grey ally, someone with insider knowledge, and a complicated past, would add a lot of depth to the story without feeling forced. Incredibles 3 is all about consequences, public opinion, redemption, accountability, and Mirage fits right into that theme. So when you line all of this up, it becomes clear that Incredibles 3 isn't just another sequel waiting to happen. It's a chance to finally address the loose threads, the unanswered questions, and the characters who were left hanging for years. And if Pixar plays it right, this could be the movie that turns a great franchise into a truly complete one. Now all that's left is to see which of these questions they're brave enough to actually answer.